You have a memory right now that never happened. Not a fuzzy memory, not a dream you half remember, a clear, confident, emotionally real memory of something that your brain constructed, partially or entirely, from nothing. You don't know which one it is. And that should unsettle you far more than it probably does. Think about a memory from your childhood, something specific, a birthday, a family trip, a moment in a house you grew up in. Feel how real it is. Feel the texture of it, the colors, the sounds, the emotional weight of being there. Now consider this. That memory is not a recording. It was never a recording. Your brain does not work like a camera or a hard drive. Every single time you access a memory, every time you remember something, you are not retrieving a stored file. You are rebuilding it, from fragments, from emotion, from suggestion, from everything you've experienced since the original event, from the stories people told you about it afterward, from photographs, from the subtle, invisible pressure of what you needed the past to be. And every time you rebuild it, you change it slightly, and then you store the changed version. And the next time you remember it, you remember the changed version. Your brain has been quietly editing your entire life story without your knowledge or consent. And the version you are living inside right now, the autobiography you carry as your identity, is a collaborative fiction between what actually happened and what your mind needed to be true. This is not a disorder. This is not a malfunction. This is memory. This is how it has always worked, for every human being who has ever lived. The field of research that exposed this truth is relatively young, and the name most associated with it is Elizabeth Loftus, a cognitive psychologist at the University of California whose work is simultaneously one of the most important and most disturbing contributions to our understanding of what it means to be a conscious, remembering creature. In the 1970s, Loftus began a series of experiments that would eventually overturn a century of assumptions about human memory. Her most famous early study involved showing people footage of a car accident and then asking them questions about what they saw. But the questions were not neutral. Some participants were asked how fast the cars were going when they hit each other. Others were asked how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other. One word, the difference of a single word between two groups of people watching the identical footage. And yet the group that heard the word smashed remembered the cars going significantly faster. They were more likely to report seeing broken glass that was never in the footage at all. They remembered something that was not there, not because they were lying, because a single word, delivered after the event, had entered their memory and changed it from the inside. But here's what's strange. The participants had no idea this had happened. They were not confused. They were not uncertain. They reported their false memories with the same confidence, the same emotional certainty, the same feeling of genuine recollection as their accurate memories. And this is the part that should make you stop breathing for a moment. You cannot tell the difference from the inside. There is no internal signal, no watermark on the false memory that distinguishes it from the real one. The feeling of remembering, that specific, subjective sense of traveling back to a moment that actually happened, is identical whether the memory is accurate or constructed. Your brain does not know the difference between a real memory and a convincing reconstruction. And neither do you. Loftus went further. In a landmark study, she implanted entirely false memories into adult participants. Not distorted memories, not altered memories, completely fabricated events that had never happened at all. She told participants, with the help of their own family members, who provided real childhood context, that they had once been lost in a shopping mall as a child, that they had been found by a kind elderly stranger, that they had been reunited with their family after this frightening experience. None of it had happened, and yet approximately 25% of participants not only accepted the false memory, they began to elaborate on it. They added details. They described the elderly stranger's clothing. They recalled how they felt standing alone in the crowded mall. They built emotional texture around an event that had never occurred. They remembered being lost. They remembered the fear. They remembered the relief. None of it was real, and they would have sworn it was. And this is where everything changes. Because if a psychologist can implant a detailed, emotionally resonant false memory of a frightening childhood event using nothing more than suggestion and the corroboration of a trusted family member, what has your life been doing to your memories for decades? Think about every conversation you've had about a shared memory with someone who remembers it differently. Every family story told repeatedly at dinner until you're no longer sure whether you remember the event or just the story about the event. Every photograph you've looked at so many times that the image has replaced the actual experience. Every time someone told you, "That's not what happened," and you felt the ground shift slightly beneath your certainty. Your memories are not yours alone. They are shaped by everyone who was there and everyone who wasn't, by the questions you were asked afterward, by the narrative your culture gave you for making sense of your experiences, by the person you were when you last retrieved them, which is never quite the same person who stored them. The terrifying part is how this connects to identity itself, because you are not just a body walking through the world. You are a story. You are the narrative you carry about who you are, where you came from, what happened to you, and what it all means. Your identity is a memory. And if memory is as malleable, as reconstructible, as quietly editable as the science suggests, then who are you, exactly? Not as a philosophical game, as a genuine, biological question. The self you experience as continuous, the thread of you that connects the child in your earliest memory to the person watching this video right now, is built from memories. And if those memories have been gradually, imperceptibly edited over decades of retrieval and reconstruction, if the events that shaped your sense of who you are have been subtly rewritten each time you remembered them, then the story you call your life may be the most elaborate piece of fiction your brain has ever produced. But that's not what scientists discovered that truly broke this open. Because Loftus and her colleagues weren't just studying false memories of past events, they were uncovering something about the fundamental architecture of memory itself, about why the brain works this way and what purpose this apparently disastrous system actually serves. And the answer is both reassuring and deeply unsettling. Memory is not designed for accuracy. It was never meant to be a perfect record of the past. Memory is designed for prediction. Your brain's primary job is not to preserve what happened. It is to use what happened to anticipate what will happen next. And a perfectly preserved, unedited archive of every past experience would actually make this harder, not easier. What the brain needs is a flexible, updatable model of reality, a constantly revised map of how the world works that incorporates new information, new context, new understanding. And that means old memories cannot be sacred. They must be available for revision whenever new information makes the revision useful. Every time you retrieve a memory, your brain opens it, updates it with whatever you now know that you didn't know then, and closes it again. You don't just remember the past. You continuously reconstruct it through the lens of the present. And then something even stranger happened. Neuroscientists began studying the brain during the act of remembering and discovered something that should fundamentally change the way you think about every memory you have. The same neural regions that activate when you remember the past are the same regions that activate when you imagine the future. Remembering and imagining use the same neural machinery. The hippocampus, the structure most central to memory formation and retrieval, is not a filing cabinet. It is a simulation engine. It constructs past experiences the same way it constructs hypothetical futures, with the same tools, the same processes, the same fundamental uncertainty about what is real and what is constructed. This is why memory and imagination feel so similar when pushed to their edges. This is why grief and anticipatory anxiety use such similar emotional language. This is why a vivid dream can briefly feel like a real memory on waking. Your brain uses one system to do two jobs, and the seam between them is far less clear than we were ever taught to believe. Now let's talk about something even more personal, something that happens to almost everyone and that almost no one talks about with the gravity it deserves. Déjà vu. That strange, fleeting, deeply uncanny feeling that you have lived this exact moment before. That this conversation, this room, this specific configuration of light and sound and sensation has happened to you already, somewhere, at some time you can't quite locate. For centuries it was mystical, evidence of past lives, psychic premonition, a glitch in reality itself. But here is what neuroscience now believes is actually happening. Your brain processes incoming sensory experience in two streams simultaneously. One stream is fast and unconscious. It begins building a memory of the current experience a fraction of a second before the slower conscious stream has fully registered what is happening. In certain conditions, when you are tired, when you are overstimulated, when there is a brief disruption in the normal synchronization between these two streams, the fast stream delivers a fragment of the current moment to memory storage before the slow stream has consciously experienced it. And then when consciousness catches up, when you consciously experience the moment that the unconscious stream has already filed away, your brain recognizes it as a memory, as something that has already happened. You are experiencing the present, and your brain is telling you it is the past. Déjà vu is not a memory of another life. It is a memory of the last fraction of a second, misfiled, misread, and served back to you as history. Your brain invented a past out of the present, and it felt completely real. Think about what this means philosophically. If your brain can convince you, with full emotional certainty, with the genuine phenomenological texture of authentic recollection, that the present moment is a memory of the past, then the relationship between your experience and reality is far more tenuous than you have ever been comfortable admitting. You trust your memories because they feel real. You trust your identity because it feels continuous. You trust your sense of what happened because you were there. But being there is not enough. Being there doesn't protect you from reconstruction. It doesn't protect you from suggestion. It doesn't protect you from the slow, inevitable editing that happens every time you revisit a moment and file it back away slightly changed. You were there, and your brain still rewrote it. Elizabeth Loftus spent decades testifying in courtrooms about the unreliability of eyewitness memory, about people who had watched crimes happen, who had looked directly into a face, and who later identified the wrong person with complete and absolute certainty. People who went to prison because a witness who genuinely believed their own memory turned out to be remembering something the brain had constructed in the aftermath of trauma, suggestion, and the desperate need to make sense of something senseless. The justice system spent decades treating memory as evidence, as fact, as the gold standard of what really happened. It is none of those things. It never was. Your brain still remembers. Everything you are, your personality, your fears, your sense of what you deserve, your understanding of who the people around you are, and how they have treated you, is built on a foundation of memories that have been revised, reconstructed, and quietly edited so many times that the original version may no longer exist in any recoverable form. This is not cause for despair. At least, it doesn't have to be. Because there is something strangely liberating in it as well. If memory is reconstruction, if the past is not fixed, not immutable, not a locked room that can never be changed, then the story you tell yourself about what happened to you is not a sentence. It is a living document. The trauma that defines you is being reconstructed every time you remember it. The story of who you are is being rewritten every time you tell it. The version of the past that feels most true is the version you have most recently and most powerfully rebuilt, which means you have more authorship over your own history than you think. Not to lie, not to deny, but to recontextualize, to bring new understanding to old events, to allow the reconstructed past to reflect the fuller, wiser, more complete person you are now, rather than the frightened, limited, incomplete person you were when you first stored the experience. Memory is not a record, it is a story. And like all stories, it is told by someone, shaped by someone, revised by someone. That someone is you. The question is whether you are telling the story consciously, with intention, with compassion, with the fullness of everything you now understand, or whether you are letting a frightened, half-informed version of your past self tell it for you. You have a memory right now that never happened exactly the way you remember it. And somewhere in the architecture of that reconstructed moment, in the details your brain added, in the emotions it amplified, in the meaning it quietly inserted after the fact, is something that tells you more about who you are right now than about what actually happened then. Your memories are not a window into the past. They are a mirror. And what they reflect is not history. It is you.